Welcome to Washington Watch with Congressman Walter Jones. Each month, we take a look at the events happening in Washington, D.C. and how they affect our lives here in eastern North Carolina. And now, here's your Congressman, Walter Jones.
Welcome to the September edition of Washington Watch. I am delighted today, and one of my very dear friends and gentleman who left the House and now is a United States Senator to join me today for the September edition is Richard Burr, United States Senator. Senator, welcome to Washington Watch.
Walter, it's great to be here. Great to be back on the House side.
I can imagine. Richard is a gentleman that has really distinguished himself. He did in the House and he already in the Senate. He's a subcommittee chairman of a very important subcommittee on bioterrorism and public health preparedness, and we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. And Richard, tell, if you will, the viewers about your family. You have a lovely wife, Brooke, and two sons. Tell the viewers where your sons are now.
Two students at Chapel Hill. One's a freshman, one's a sophomore. How quickly kids grow up. You and I came together several years ago here. My kids were at the time 8 and 9, and what a change that's happened over that period. But, you know, Walter, I'll take the opportunity to say this now with two children in higher education in North Carolina, and now a member of the Education Committee charged with higher education reauthorization. It wasn't until I got thrust into this that I sat and looked at North Carolina and realized that North Carolina has more colleges and universities, 4-year and 2-year, public and private, than any state in the United States. The power of our attraction for economic development and job creation is, in fact, the number of graduates of all those institutions that we produce every year in North Carolina.
Richard, been a former member of the state legislature. Of course, that was years ago. I have a real appreciation, as you did, and you just articulated that, with the community college system. I think we have one of the best in the United States, and we certainly have very fine higher education universities. And I know that it's going to be tough for you when Wake Forest plays Carolina in football. We have two sons at Carolina, and I believe you play football at Wake Forest, but being the great public servant you are, you know how to play that game, I'm sure.
Well, somebody asked me one day when Duke and Carolina were playing, and I was in the midst of a campaign who I was going to root for. My answer was the winner.
Richard, let me, before we get into some specific issues, tell the viewers, and myself, quite frankly, I don't get a chance to monitor the Senate very much, but I know I've seen you in the chair what few times I've been watching, and tell me about a new member of the Senate, what it is like to be in the Senate chair when they're debating. Many times you've been on the floor debating, that I realize, but when you're in the chair, you've got the gavel, so to speak, but they don't call it the gavel.
No, they don't, and the Senate rules are totally different than the House. Starts with the fact that there is no time limit. We don't have a rule that we go to the floor with on a bill, so really the only tool is whether, in fact, you want to cut off debate, and the only way to cut off debate is to have 60 votes. Which one party or the other seldom controls 60 votes. So it is a process where we operate under unanimous consent in many cases. If one person objects, the Senate doesn't move forward. We move to another piece of legislation. The chair is a challenging event in the United States Senate, just simply because everything is unstructured. And so the opportunity goes to the next person who acknowledges the chair is where you've got to put your attention. It's not back and forth from one side to the other. Every freshman in the majority that comes in is obligated to at least 100 hours before they get a little more flexible schedule. I'm fortunate in the fact that the way my schedule worked and the fact that I learned in the House that the best way to learn everybody on both sides of the aisle is sit in the chair. If you've got that opportunity, you learn more about individuals from up there than any place. So I was able to complete my 100 hours in the fastest period in the history of the United States Senate.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I would think, and you made mention to this, that the rules of the House and Senate, particularly the Senate, I think are more complex than the House, and the House rules are pretty complex to me. You probably in the chair get a really good opportunity as you were sitting there to officiate the debate, so to speak, to also listen to how the rules are being used by the members who might be speaking at that time.
Well, you do, and sitting beside you is a book that says the rules of the Senate. I've always been scared to open it because I'm really scared the pages are blank, that this is a process where they make it up. But Senator Helms was one of the best. He understood the rules. Senator Burr from West Virginia really does understand the rules. And it's not like, it's like any other institution. If you're willing to take the time to learn the procedural process, then you've got a tremendous advantage on everybody else in there. And I think for all of us that have just come in, I think that's our objective, is to really concentrate on what the rules are and how to use them to our advantage to get things happening.
Senator, before we get into some of the committee responsibilities and maybe your views on Katrina and what happened and did not happen, we'll talk about that in a moment. You know, it's of great interest, particularly to the 3rd District, I would say to the majority of the people, not all, but to the majority of people, the issue dealing with with John Roberts, who's been nominated by the President now to be the Chief of the United States Senate, which I thought was an excellent move by the President. As you know, I don't always agree with the President, but on this one I would say that I thought that his nomination, since Justice Rehnquist just died recently, that Judge Roberts, or excuse me, hope to be Judge John Roberts would be nominated.
Well, I think the American people understand the importance of a justice on the Supreme Court. They understand the need for an odd number versus an even number, because we want that to be the court that decides things in its final stage, not necessarily an appellate court because there was a tie vote. We've been committed to make sure that we got that 9th justice placed before the October 3rd beginning of the next session of the Supreme Court. At 9:30 this morning, I was over with the rest of the Senate as we viewed the casket of Justice Rehnquist. And I realized that we've delayed John Roberts' hearings for a week, which I think was the appropriate thing with the service this afternoon. But the reality is we're still committed to do it by October the 3rd. This is a man that displays the type of intellect we want on the court, the experience that we believe should exist in any nominee. And I might say that this will be the only justice, when confirmed, that has ever argued a case in front of the Supreme Court. And not just one case, but 39 cases. And it takes a threshold, as lawyers know, a threshold that few meet to argue that many cases in front of the Supreme Court. So he brings with it a unique experience from a standpoint of clerking for Judge Rehnquist, of actually arguing cases in the Supreme Court, and being very successful in every area of public and private law that he's practiced.
You know, he does have a very impressive record of service and as an attorney, and I really appreciate you sharing that background with the viewers, because this is of great interest to a large percentage in Eastern North Carolina, and I'm certainly, since you represent the state of North Carolina, to a large percentage across the state. And
you know, Walter, this is one of those areas that as a House member, I never had the full understanding of the challenges the Senate runs through. With judicial nominees and with treaties, things where the Senate has a responsibility, a constitutional obligation, but the House had no involvement.
Right.
And this month we will primarily on John Roberts' confirmation. Not that we're not going to do other things,
right?
But it's everything we do is overshadowed by the progress or the lack we make on John Roberts.
Senator, you're on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. You also subcommittee on energy, health, education, labor, and pensions. You're on the Veterans Affairs Committee and also the Indian Affairs. I would like, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the issue dealing with the cost of gasoline. I know you and I both do a lot of traveling in the state of North Carolina. You've got the entire state. I did almost 3,000 miles from August 4 to September 4 in the 3rd District of North Carolina primarily. You pay for the gas, I pay for the gas, and people are saying, and I know y'all are holding hearings on your side, or you're going to. I know we will on ours in a week or so.
Well, the reality is that North Carolina is no longer rural and urban from a standpoint of transportation. The urban areas have grown so large that the workforce in many cases drives 30 and 40 minutes, if not longer, to get in. And in the rural areas, in many cases, you represent constituents that drive 45 minutes in the morning for their job. That's a burden on the family budget today. Now that gas has doubled in price, that most families just it can't absorb. That's the savings for their college, for their kids. It's the little bit that they were able to put in a savings account. So our objective is to get this back down, but we're in an unstable marketplace. The fact that the House and the Senate, for the first time in the 11 years I've served here, passed an energy bill, the President signed it into law, gives me a strong belief that stability will return to the energy markets, but it's just not going to happen overnight. Short-term North Carolinians have been affected by the fact that Katrina caused a power outage to the two pipelines that feed gasoline to North Carolina. Today, they're both up and running. They're above 90% capacity. I think as we move closer to the weekend, we'll find that supply won't be a problem. The price has already started down, but not at the rate that it went up. Right. And I think that's always historically what we see. But our hope is that we can get it back to a level, and certainly the Energy Information Association, which is part of the Energy Department, estimates that as we go into the beginning of the year, it should be down in the 240 range, which is a reduction of almost 50 to 60 cents from where we are today.
That would be extremely helpful, because, Richard, you really did, and you are a compassionate person, as I feel that I am, and we do understand that we have so many citizens in the 3rd District and across the state of North Carolina that really are doing the very best they can, and when they get that kind of jump in the cost of gasoline, as you said, it does impact the budget of that family greatly and in a very negative way. So what you've shared with the viewers, I think, is very encouraging, and we wait and hope to see that happen.
You know, I might take the opportunity to touch on another committee responsibility on a different committee, and that's the health care commitment that I've made to the state, and more importantly, that comes out of Health, Education, Labor, Pensions Committee. Health care is very quickly becoming the single greatest challenge for an American family. It's becoming the #1 issue as it relates to American competitiveness in a global marketplace. Employers that struggle with, can they pick up the rest of the tab and still remain competitive, or do they have to put more of it on the employee, which means it comes out of one budget or the other? Walter, it's time that we fix this. It's time that we get prevention and wellness as part of the coverage in America, and it's not just the private sector. It's in things like Medicaid and Medicare. And I'm convinced that it's going to take the federal government intricately involved in Medicaid to get reforms in 50 states. We're blessed that we're in a progressive state like North Carolina with programs like Carolina Access that do provide coverage in a way that's different from most of the Medicaid programs. But we also understand that the longer people are uncovered, the longer that people don't receive the primary care that they need, that we're running the most expensive health care system in the country. So I am convinced that we've got to make primary care a mainstream, whether it's purchased from the private sector through our employers, or whether it comes out of the state program called Medicaid, which we fund over 60% of in North Carolina. There's got to be a primary care aspect.
Well, I couldn't agree more, because, you know, with the large number of retired military and veterans that live in the 3rd District, and of course when you factor in that population across the state, which is your responsibility along with Senator Dole, we also have issues dealing with our veterans, as you know, their health care, just like we do with Medicaid and Medicare. It is at the forefront of our hope, as you said, that we can somehow bring to ensure the adequate funding for our veterans, and as you said, we do need reforms in other areas as well, because health care is astronomical.
And as you know, the Veterans Administration missed the projection by about $1 billion this year on what the needs were going to be. Congress has responded. We've made sure that veterans have the services that we promised them. But the reality is that we also have to wake up and see what's happening in North Carolina. The Census Bureau projects that we will have a population increase in our state of 53% over the next 20 years, that North Carolina would be the 7th most populated state in the country, that we lead the country in the growth of military retirees. Right. We lead the country in the percentage of growth of Hispanic communities. There are a lot of trends that as a state we need to get in front of, but we also need to realize why people are moving to North Carolina. They're moving because of the quality of life, a state where you can find the beach and the mountains, a state that has the finest higher education infrastructure in the country, and a state that produces the next generation of workforce on an annual basis out of higher education and community colleges and with the technical skills that they look for.
Richard, in addition to the issues that you just made mention, I want to bring up, because I know that you're as concerned as I am, and that is beach renourishment. I went to Carteret County during the August break. I know you were in Dare County, and both counties are really concerned about the fact that the federal government, and it happened under President Clinton as it has under President Bush, they seem to find less and less money for beach renourishment projects and many of the waterway projects. And I've told people that that you're very much aware and concerned, and there is no easy fix to this, but we're going to try to look down the road. It's not now at this point to talk about, but see what opportunities might be available to give more strength and power to the states to find some of this money.
Well, you and I have talked, and it's your leadership, I think, on many of the coastal communities that have enabled us this year to once again address in the appropriations bill the needs for beach renourishment, for dunes renourishment, for the intercoastal waterway maintenance. Right. We've got a lot of things, and you're right, for 11 years you and I have battled annually, regardless of who's in the White House, a zero in the budget, and we've overcome it. And the fact is that North Carolinians need to realize we can't win this forever.
That's right.
If you count the number of states that have a coastline, and you exclude the West Coast because they have no beach renourishment needs,
right.
You realize how many votes we have in the United States Senate if it really comes down to it. And you can just about calculate the House members that are affected. So as the demographics of America shifts, so does the challenge for us to win this on an annual basis, and we're going to have to be creative. Right. We're going to have the state of North Carolina be a partner with us.
Absolutely.
We're going to have the communities on the coast be flexible and creative as to how we approach this with a long-term, permanent solution.
Well, like you said, the challenges that we had discussed just today on this brief show are enormous, and yet I do believe that we're the greatest nation in the world, as I know you do, and that if we can roll up our sleeves and sometimes put the politics to the side, we can find some solutions, and I know you feel this way.
Well, and we see it happen every day in North Carolina. You know, as I mentioned, the population growth in North Carolina, this is a reason for North Carolina to be excited, for its residents to be excited, to have completed the BRAC process and to see Fort Bragg, the Pentagon of the Army, to see Camp Lejeune and Camp Pendleton still the mainstream of the Marine Corps, to see Cherry Point still there and the possibility of expansion in the future, to see expansion at Seymour Johnson, to see the not just the federal but the state commitment to the men and women who wear a uniform in a volunteer army says a lot about North Carolina.
Sure.
And I think that, you know, you alluded to the fact that our brightest days are ahead of us. And I think you would agree with me, we've spent a lot of time with our soldiers and Marines and airmen and pilots. For parents, we often wonder whether we've done a successful job raising our children. We've got a generation of folks that we participated in raising. Mine might be just slightly younger than yours, but I go through the same concerns. And the reality is that when you see these kids in uniform and their level of commitment and how heroic and brave they are, you understand that we've done a wonderful job at raising the next generation. That when you and I leave these seats, when we're no longer the ones running, and we look back at what we did, our greatest accomplishment will not be something we did here. Our greatest accomplishment will be the generation that we helped raise that are more than adequate to take over the leadership of this country, to fill these seats, to fill our shoes. They will be filled by people who are much more capable and committed than I think all of us who are in Washington today.
Richard, I would agree with your assessment. I've had the opportunity and the privilege, as you have, I believe, to go to Bethesda to visit those who've been wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan. And as you have done, I've visited the bases on a regular basis, and we are blessed with all of our men and women in uniform, as well as those that are in our colleges and universities. Richard, we've only got about 20 seconds. I want to thank you very much for being with me today, and I know the people have thoroughly enjoyed this program. Thank you for your service to the people of North Carolina and this nation. And I want to say to you that watching that in about 1 minute, Glenn Downs, my Chief of Staff, will be on the set with me to review some letters from the district. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Walter.
Okay. Welcome to the second part of September Washington Watch. It was a real pleasure to have Senator Burr on, and now I have Glenn Downs, the Chief of Staff, who's been with our office for 12 years and doing a great job for the people of the 3rd District, and certainly a great help to me. Glenn?
Congressman, you just got back from, Congress just restarted here after the August district work period, and you said you went about 3,000 miles across eastern North Carolina. And you talked to people, and one of the things that you talked to them about was the situation that you, Mr. Burr, mentioned about gasoline prices. And you wrote this letter to the Federal Trade Commission,
right,
and this one to the chairman of the House Energy Committee about the issue. What were you trying to accomplish, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I appreciated what Senator Burr said. I thought that was very helpful, insightful also to the people of the district. What I wanted to happen with Congressman Barton from Texas, who's chairman of the Energy Committee on the House side, and I understand he is going to hold hearings next week. I wanted him to help the American people and the people of the 3rd District, along with myself, understand this pricing. Because, Glenn, you and I both know people have called the office, they've seen me, they've seen you, they want to know how in the world can you increase the price 30 cents in one night. I think if the people like myself, I want to put myself at the forefront, can better understand this pricing, and the Congress can do this by calling to the hearings the corporate presidents of these oil companies and get them to come in, get the distributors to come in and explain how this pricing works. And then we can better adjust to the prices when we understand the pricing.
Well, part of the increase in the price is being attributed to the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and that's obviously in the news as we're taping here today, and will be in the weeks and months to come, I suppose. You have had, in eastern North Carolina, have had a lot of experience with hurricanes.
Sure have.
And a lot of people have analogized this situation with Katrina to what eastern North Carolina faced a few years back with Hurricane Floyd, when they looked like they dodged the bullet, and then came the floodwaters that persisted for a very long period of time. What lessons do you take out of that, do you think might be able to apply to this Katrina situation?
Well, Glenn, I would say that what happened to eastern North Carolina was devastating to the people in our district, and to us, because we had some damage too. But what has happened in Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana is really it's a different type of devastation. Certainly it was devastation for us in eastern North Carolina and many of our citizens, but the size of this is just enormous. And I think this week we will be passing on the floor of the House a supplemental to help the victims of Katrina that could be the size of $40 billion. That is a unbelievably sizable supplemental, but that's just the beginning. And certainly there was a cost down in eastern North Carolina and other southern states that were impacted by Floyd, but this cost is going to be something like I'm not sure we've seen in this country in my lifetime.
In the Hurricane Floyd situation in eastern North Carolina, a lot of federal money got directed down there to buy out homes of people who had had their homes that had been flooded out. But part of the price of that was that people weren't able to rebuild there.
Right.
So that in future floods, they wouldn't have that same scope of devastation.
Right.
obviously you're talking about in New Orleans much greater devastation and possible other buyouts. Do you think there ought to be other similar restrictions on people that are building there even below sea level?
Glenn, that's going to be the discussion and the debate in Washington, because you're talking about a city, a sizable city, and the whole dynamics are different than where we were talking about in eastern North Carolina, where there were small communities where this devastation took place, and it was feasible to buy out or give the option to buy out the person's home or help them with a low-interest loan to renovate or remodel. But we haven't yet begun to undertake and debate the task that I think is forthcoming in New Orleans.
Congressman, over the August, our office got an awful lot of calls on the subject of illegal immigration and feeling that the federal government has not gotten control of the border, particularly with Mexico. What did you hear during your travels, those 3,000 miles?
Glenn, I heard the same thing. I don't know how many times a reporter asked me, what are you hearing back in your district? And I said, gas prices and illegal aliens coming into this country at the rate of 8,000 to 10,000 a week. And I call and have called on this administration, along with many of my colleagues, to please enforce the immigration laws of this country, because we just cannot afford what I consider is an illegal alien coming to this country. That is a violation of the federal law, and we need to deal with people who are here illegally and send them back to their country and let them come through the normal process if they want to become an American citizen or work here in America.
I know we're about out of time. Very quickly, you, Mr. Burr, talked about BRAC. How pleased were you with the outcome?
Glenn, we came out extremely well in North Carolina, and I think the future of our bases is extremely bright. Let me say thank you for watching September Watch, and God bless America.
Thank you for taking the time to join us for Washington Watch. If you would like to contact Congressman Jones, you're welcome to write to your Greenville office at 1105C Corporate Drive, Greenville, North Carolina, 27858. Or call toll-free at 1-800-351-1697. You may also contact the Washington, D.C. office at the following address: 422 Cannon House Office Building, Washington, D.C. 20515. Or please call 202-225-3415.